Well, good evening. We might be a minute early, but that won't hurt anything. Good to see you. We are ready for, in Numbers 31 is where we're going to pick up tonight. And we'll kind of set the stage there and try to make our way. It's possible that we may finish the book of Numbers tonight, but if not, Lord willing, it'll be our next time together. And in Numbers 25, what did God call upon the children of Israel to do to the Midianites? Yeah, to go and kill them. So this is verse 17, be hostile to the Midianites and strike them, for they've been hostile to you with their deceptive tricks. I talked a little bit about this the last time we talked through this, and you know, it is not as if the Midianites are the only ones bearing the consequences of that. Who else had to bear the consequences of this sin? The Israelites, yeah, and Balaam will have to bear it as well. But the Israelite men, especially who were involved, they're bearing this sin too. And so it's not as if God is just putting all of the blame or all of the weight on the people of Midian. But they do deserve, maybe even the men that were not directly participating deserve some of the blame, because this was all part of a conspiracy to try to destroy Israel. And so God is going to bring vengeance on them. I made mention last time that in verse 2, take full vengeance for the sons of Israel. Well, what does it mean, take full vengeance? The end of verse 3, to execute Yahweh's vengeance on Midian. This is God's judgment on these people. This is not an arbitrary decision on the base on Israel's part. In fact, when you think about the people of Moab specifically, God had told them not to take their land. And we read more about this in the book of Deuteronomy, that actually Moab, its land was reserved because it was from the descendants of Lot. And in this case, Balak of the Moabites he didn't let them go. I guess he was afraid that after they had defeated Sihon and Og, they would turn their attention to him. But that was not what was intended. But anyway, so I think we got down to about verse 12, where they brought the captives, the loot, and the spoil to Moses and to Eleazar the priest, to the congregation of the sons of Israel, to the camp at the plains of Moab, which are by the Jordan opposite Jericho. Did you have anything else as far as an introduction? All right, so when they get back, notice verses 13 and following, especially look at 14. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds who had come from service in the war. So Moses said to them, have you spared all the women? Behold, these caused the sons of Israel through the word of Balaam to act unfaithfully against Yahweh in the matter of Peor. So the plague was among the congregation of Yahweh. So now kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man intimately. But all the girls who have not known man intimately, spare for yourselves. And you camp outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any person, whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves, you and your captives on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day. And you shall purify for yourselves every garment, and every article of leather, and all the work of goat's hair, and all the articles of wood. And so Moses is disturbed that they have not carried out the job as fully as it needed to be carried out. And so he orders them to kill all of these women who had known a man and to spare the other ones. Now, so somebody who's coming at the Bible maybe from a skeptical point of view, I think that would look maybe disturbing. But what I think we should know is that in other places, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, there were strict rules about how to deal with these people. And it was not something where these women could be abused or mistreated. They had to be taken in as wives and cared for, and there were limitations even on the husbands being able to put them away, which those limitations don't seem to really have been on a marriage within Israel. And so there are more restrictions. If you decide this is what you're going to do, then you have to take full responsibility here. And I'm not saying this as far as a justifying thing, but you think about the way that women were treated during warfare in all the other ancient cultures. Absolutely horrific. And so the fact that they were being brought into a community where the laws are, where God's law for them is, you have to treat these people in a special way, in a particular way. obviously not a happy circumstance in any situation, but a much more regulated and humane way of dealing with that than if you were conquered by the Egyptians or by the Assyrians or something like that. It would have been absolutely horrific in those cases.
It goes to show even what you talked about earlier about Moses being angry. I mean, Moses knew if it wasn't done right that the Lord could send another plague and kill a whole bunch of people. But the main thing that I see out of all this is God's righteous judgment.
Mm-hmm.
It don't matter if you're on the good side or if you're on the bad side. If you're actually deserving of death,
yes,
righteous judgment,
mm-hmm.
He took it. And that's the same thing today. I mean,
yes,
when we actually stand before Him, we'll be judged on our deeds,
yep.
and whether we're right with the Lord. But He's going to do a righteous judgment no matter who you are.
Yeah, I think that's important. That before we criticize what the Bible says God does, we need to be aware of who the Bible says God is. And I think we've learned from the beginning of Genesis. I think about Genesis 18 especially, as Abraham is having that conversation with God. Will not the judge of all the earth do right? And I think the reason that maybe we're given so much insight into that conversation in Genesis 18 and 19 and God's thought process and His evaluation and His investigation and His patience with Sodom is so that we will know, we will have as a baseline indicator all the way through the Old Testament and even today, that when God brings a judgment, He doesn't do so lightly. That He only does so with all the information on the table, and He only does so with righteousness and with love. And that's how He makes all of His decisions. And so we don't get that kind of background information every time, but we know it's there because we trust that the God of all the earth will do right, that the judge of all the earth will do right. All right. I don't know how much we want to go into. They have to purify these things that are coming back. They have to be purified. And then the second half of chapter 31 is about the division of the spoil that comes from this war. And it looks like it's divided half between the military men and half between the congregation. Now that makes sense, right? Because even though the military men would be a smaller group, it's only 12,000, they're the ones who have gone out and done the fighting. And so they get half of the loot here. And the congregation, and I don't know how it was distributed to the congregation, but it's going to be set aside for the whole group. And then out of that, the congregation, I believe I have this correct, they will bring their portion to the Levites, correct? And then the military men will bring their portion to the priests. So that's a smaller group, but of course they're drawing off of a smaller group with the military men. And so anyway, and then we have the numbers there of how much that would be for each one. Anything you'd like to say about all of that?
No.
Okay. Anybody else through chapter 31 comments about the division here? Okay. I do want to mention this. Look at verse 48 of chapter 31. The officers who were over the thousands of the army, the commanders of the thousands, the commanders of the hundreds came near to Moses, and they said to Moses, "Your servants have taken a census of men of war who are in our charge, and no man of us is missing. So we have brought near as an offering to Yahweh what each man found, articles of gold, armlets and bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces to make atonement for ourselves before Yahweh." So I think this is an extra contribution that's being made because they've gone out to war and not one person was missing. And you have to imagine that even on your best day, somebody gets killed out in military conflict. I know even in situations where maybe during days of colonization or something, one side has firearms and the other doesn't, and still somebody gets killed on even the more technologically advanced side. So they recognize this as God taking care of them and providing for them. And so when it says they were making atonement, I don't know, it's not as if they were looking necessarily for forgiveness, but they were paying for their protection. They were responding appropriately to the covering that they had been given. And so anyway, that takes us then through the end of 31. All right, I think now we go to chapter 26. Is that right? So this is going to jump around a little bit, and we'll talk about that. But what we're trying to do is kind of put all these things in a logical way. We went to 31 because that fit better with chapter 25 because it followed up on the judgment that came on the Midianites. So if you want to take us through some of chapter 26, that'd be great.
Here God tells them that he wants them to take a second census here in Israel. And it came to pass after the plague that the Lord spoke to Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years old and above, by their fathers' houses, all who were able to go to war in Israel. And so Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, take a census of the people from 20 years above, just as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel who came out of the land. So he wants them to take another census. And in verses 5 through 51 is all of the names of the people included in that census. And I don't think we need to read all of that. But anyway, picking up with verse 52, it says, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, to these the land shall be divided as an inheritance according to the number of names. To a large tribe you shall give a larger inheritance, and to a small tribe you shall give a smaller inheritance. Each shall be given its inheritance according to those who were numbered with them. So it just makes sense. Well, this is one reason why the census was taken. They needed to know how large and how small, how big and how small the tribes were, because the land was going to be divided up accordingly. And so there's a lot of specifics given in detail later on in Joshua about this. But in verse 57, picking up there, it says, and these are those who were numbered of the Levites according to their families. So he wanted them to take a census of the Levites also. Of Gershon, the family of the Gershonites; of Kohath, the family of the Kohathites; and of Merari, the family of the Merarites. These are the families of the Levites: the family of the Libnites, the family of the Hebronites, the family of the Mahalites, Malites, the family of the Mushites. And it goes on through verse 62. But in verse 59, the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. And to Amram she bore Aaron and Moses and their sister Miriam. And so to Aaron were born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar, and Nadab and Abihu died when they offered profane fire before the Lord. Now those who were numbered of them, here's the amount, were 23,000 every male from a month old and above, for they were not numbered among the other children of Israel, because there was no inheritance given to them among the children. So let's just finish the chapter. These are those who were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. But among these there was not a man of those who were numbered but Moses and Aaron the priest, when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, they shall surely die in the wilderness. So there was not left a man of them except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. So the very last verse there says that there was only how many left from the last census in this age group?
Just 2 men.
2 men. Who were they?
Caleb and Joshua, who give a good report when they went
Yes.
over there to spy out the land.
Right. And of course, the Levites weren't given any land either, were they? And so, so the number of Levites was 23,000. And Basically, that's what that chapter's all about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the total number in 51, verse 51, 601,730. Remember, at the beginning, it was 603,550. So just a small reduction. Some of the tribes are much smaller, like Simeon is much smaller. One person that I read suggested that maybe, remember the man who brought the Midianite woman right into the middle of the camp? He was a Simeonite. So one person suggested that maybe there was more of the tribe of Simeon that was affected in the plague at Peor. Maybe that was something going on there. I think like Judah increases actually, and Ephraim and Manasseh are both very large, and I think they actually switched places. Whichever one was bigger in the first census was smaller in the second census. But all that is to say is it's about the same number. But the emphasis is going to be that when they go into the land this time, they have the same exact number that they had. This time they're going to be successful when they were not the first time. And the difference is because the Lord is going to be with them. All right, anything through chapter 26 that you would like to make mention of?
Back in verse 33, Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, had no sons. And that's what chapter 27 deals with about. And so
that's right.
That's what.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because that sets us up. He has 5 daughters. These are mentioned in 27 and the end of verse 1. Their names were Mala, Noah, and Hogla, and Milcah, and Tirzah. I tried to talk Lydia into one of those for this. She wouldn't take it. But anyway, I'm kidding. I didn't try to talk her into it.
Anna got one up.
Yeah, you got Noah. That's right. So they come to Moses, and they say, our father died in the wilderness. Right? He was not among those, he says, who gathered themselves together against Yahweh in the congregation of Korah, but he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. So I think they're making a specific statement here. If he had died in the trespass of Korah, then that would be a thing that, in some ways, perhaps he had abdicated his inheritance. He didn't have a right to pass that on, but he didn't. He died, I guess, just in the general rebellion, just in the general refusal to go in. But he had no sons. And so there was no provision, at least up to this point, about how that land would be passed down. And so they say in verse 4, why should the name of our father be withdrawn from among his family because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. One of the things that we see in the law is that there was a very serious concern about making sure that land stayed within the family and within the tribe. And it was so serious that every 50 years at the year of Jubilee, what happened to the land claims? They reset. They went back to the land to whom they originally belonged. And the reason for that is in a society like that was agricultural, that was so dependent on land, that it would be possible to sell yourself out of land and then just be ruined. And that to be a generational kind of ruin, where your children are never able to recover from that. But in 50 years, if that resets, then it's not going to go too many generations before that resets. Now, I don't know if we have an example of them actually ever doing that, of ever actually resetting. But you can see in God's provision that that's going to be taken care of. But these daughters, they say, just because our father had no sons, should he be left out? Now, how does Moses address this? What does he do first? He goes to God, which we see Moses do over and over. And I think it's really important, and especially on a question like this, maybe we're thinking about a gender equality issue. Can't you imagine how many people would say, well, I can't see any reason why it'd be any different? Well, that's fine. But Moses takes it to the Lord first. He goes to God and sees what he has to say about it. And so in verse 6, the Lord speaks to Moses saying, the daughters of Zelophehad are right in their statements. You shall surely give them a possession for an inheritance among their father's brothers, and you shall have the inheritance of their father pass on to them. Further, you shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall have his inheritance to pass on to his daughter. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his blood relative in his own family, and he shall possess it, and it shall be a statutory judgment to the sons of Israel, just as Yahweh commanded Moses. And so what you have is it will go first to the sons, then to the daughters, then to the brothers, then to the uncles, and then to the nearest kin, as the case may be. And so that sets up a provision for the passing down of land so that it's as much as possible stays within that family. And then whenever that's not possible, whenever that's all those options have been exhausted, it still stays relatively close within that tribe. All right. Let's see. Is this where we jump over to chapter 36? So we're going to resolve this. I say resolve it. Another question comes up in chapter 36 because these are the family of the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the son of Joseph. So you've got, this is a Manasseh tribe family, and they're going to be part of that we're going to talk about in just a second, that settles on the far side of the Jordan. What comes known, I think that becomes known as Gilead, that side over there. And what is their concern? Do you remember as you're looking through this? Yes, okay. Yeah, so that will be their concern. I think that's in chapter 32, right? 31, 32. And am I right about that? Or 34 and 35? In this case, it's regarding the daughters of Zelophehad. And they say, okay, you can pass the land down to the daughters, but what happens if they marry outside our tribe? Because one of the concerns is making sure the land like Manasseh is saying, well, that's all well and good that it goes down to the daughters of Zelophehad, but if they marry somebody from the tribe of Reuben, now the land's going to go into that man's name, and then now the tribe of Reuben is going to be bigger, and Manasseh is going to have land taken away from it. And so they are concerned about that. So notice that verse 2, Yahweh commanded my Lord to give the land by lot to the sons of Israel as an inheritance, and my Lord was commanded by Yahweh to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, to his daughters. But if they marry one of the sons of the other tribes of the sons of Israel, their inheritance will be withdrawn from the inheritance of our fathers and will be added to the inheritance of the tribe to which they belong. Thus it will be withdrawn from our allotted inheritance. And then, even at the Jubilee, it would not reset back because it would go to the father's house. And so, if I understand correctly, it would never reset appropriately in that case. So, Moses speaks to the people, and what is the conclusion? What's the answer to this case? Do you remember?
Don't never change from tribe to tribe, no matter what actually ends up with the daughter being who she is.
Yeah, that is right, but it will not change tribes. But what's the provision that's put in place?
Married within the tribe.
They have to marry within the tribe. They can marry anybody they want to, as long as it's within their tribe. Like Henry Ford, you can have any color you want, as long as it's black, and you can have any tribe you want, as long as it's from Manasseh. Any husband you want, as long as it's from Manasseh. So that is going to be the provision, as Mr. Steve said, to make sure that it does not go outside of the tribe. So there is both a provision and a restriction in order to make sure that, so that way when it does reset, it's going to reset to a different father's house, but it's still going to be those women's children that are getting it eventually. And also, it will reset within the tribe. It won't reset outside of the tribe. Okay, that makes sense? Did I say that clearly? Okay. Now, all right, you take us wherever we need to go next.
Chapter 27. Going back to chapter
Yes.
27. We pick up with verse 12. And we'll read through verse 23. Now the Lord said to Moses, go up into this Mount Abraham, and see the land which I have given to the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother was gathered. For in the wilderness of Zin, during the strife of the congregation, you rebelled against my command to hallow me at the waters before their eyes. These are the waters of Meribah at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. Then Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, who may go out before them and go in before them, who may lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be like sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight. And you shall give some of your authority to him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. He shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before the Lord for him by the judgment of the Urim. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, he and all the children of Israel with him, all the congregation. So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. And he laid his hands on him and inaugurated him just as the Lord had commanded. So here we see that Moses is coming to the end of his, nearing the end of his life. And Moses asked the Lord, he says, well, I need us, you need to appoint a man to succeed me. And of course, Moses, he selected Joshua, and he said, this needs to be done before all the people so they can see it, and they'll know that he is the man that will be in charge after you have gone. And but he did tell him, he's not through with Moses yet. There's some more work that Moses has to do, a little more work, and but we see that it's coming closer to the near the end of his life.
I don't have anything else on that, and we will see more about passing it down to Joshua at the end of the book of Deuteronomy after he finishes those speeches there. Anything else through chapter 27, either on the daughters of Zelophehad or with regards to Joshua as Moses' successor? I think it was probably for a long time had been known that Joshua would be the one to succeed him, but I don't know. It has not been until pretty recently that we knew that Moses was not going to be able to go in the land, right? That wasn't until Numbers 20. I think up till then, you would have assumed that Moses would have carried them on in the land, and then Joshua would have taken over at some point after that. But now we know that Joshua is going to be the one to lead them in. Okay, anything else on 27? All right, so now we need to go to chapter 32. So we're going to kind of skip 28, 20, I say kind of skip, we're going to completely skip 28, 29, and 30. Those have to do with sacrifices and feast days. When we talked about the book of Leviticus, we covered most of that information, and so we're not going to do that twice. And you can look, if you have a copy of Brother Waldron's book, he kind of groups all of that together and tells you which passages go together. Then chapter 31, we looked at in connection with chapter 25 with the judgment that came on Midian for the sin at Peor. And now 32 is going to be an occasion that perhaps you remember well. So there are the sons of Reuben, the tribe of Reuben, and the tribe of Gad, and we will later also see that this will include the half-tribe of Manasseh. They are keepers. This is 32:1. They had an exceedingly large number of livestock, and they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that it was indeed a place suitable for livestock. So the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben came and spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, Adaroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sebam, Nebo, and beyond. The land which Yahweh struck before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. Now, this seems like a reasonable request, but Moses is going to respond in verse 6. And what's his concern?
They can't leave the rest of their brethren hanging out. Right?
That's exactly right. Yes, he is horrified that what's happening here is what happened 40 years ago. Notice he says in verse 6, shall your brothers go to war while you yourself sit here? Why are you discouraging the sons of Israel from crossing over into the land which Yahweh is giving them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. Indeed, they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, and they discouraged the sons of Israel, so they did not go into the land which Yahweh had given them. So maybe this is framed in a little better terms, like, hey, this land is great for us too, but he's saying the effect is no different than what was happening 40 years ago. You're going to break your brothers' hearts. You're going to discourage them from going in the land. They may all say, well, if they're not going, I'm not going. And they may all stay on this side. So he reminds them The Lord's anger burned. He said they will not enter. Caleb and Joshua will. He made them wander in the wilderness, verse 13. Verse 14, you have risen up in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to add still more to the burning anger of Yahweh against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once more abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all these people. Make sure you understand the weight of the actions that you're taking here. You do this, and you are destroying the people. All right. Now, they're going to respond back to Moses, if you want to take us through there.
Verse 16.
Yes, sir.
Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones will dwell in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the children of Israel has received his inheritance, for we will not inherit with them on the other side of Jordan and beyond, because of our inheritance has fallen to us on this eastern side of the Jordan. So here's their response to Moses to let him know how they feel about this and what they're going to do. They told him, they said, we'll go fight with them, and we won't come back until they have received their inheritance. And so
yeah. Well, just in verse 20, he says, if you'll do this, if you'll arm yourselves before Yahweh for the war, your armed men will cross over. Then verse 22, and the land is subdued before Yahweh. Then afterward you shall return and be free of obligation toward Yahweh and toward Israel. And this land shall be yours for possession before Yahweh. Notice verse 23. But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord. And behold, be sure your sin will find you out. Which he's saying, if you don't do what you commit to doing, you won't be able to escape the consequences of it. You will be found out about that, which is a good warning for everybody. Verse 24, build yourselves cities for your little ones and sheepfolds for your sheep, and do what you have promised. And so then they're going to commit to that, verses 25 through 27, and then he's going to reiterate that both to Eleazar and to Joshua in verses 28 and following, and kind of describes what the outline of their territory is going to look like. And when you look at the actual taking of the land, the conquest, then we'll see what that territory is going to look like. Anything else through 32? Chapter 32, anybody? Any comments or questions about that? All right. Now, I think we need to look at chapter 35. Is that right? 34 and 35?
Well,
I'm sorry.
The rest of that chapter, he talks about where their locations were
yes, that's right.
Gad was going to be in the middle part of the land of Canaan. Manasseh was going to be in the north, and Reuben was going to be in the south.
Yes. Yes, that's helpful.
That's all that is the rest of the chapter is about. Now, chapter 33.
Yes, chapter 33. Now, what chapter 33 is a record of their journeys.
Yes, and I don't think we need to read all of that. Through verse 49, it talks about their journeys from Egypt, and it, like it said, it just goes through and reviews all of that, and it lists about 42 stopping places along the way. But getting down to verse 50, we'll pick up there. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you have crossed the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, destroy all their engraved stones, destroy all their molded images, and demolish all their high places. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. And you shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. To the larger you shall give a larger inheritance, and to the smaller you shall give a smaller inheritance. There everyone's inheritance shall be whatever falls to him by lot. You shall inherit according to the tribes of your father. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be irritants in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they will harass you in the land where you dwell. Moreover, it shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them. So God's instructions here is completely drive all the people out of the land. That's what he really wanted them to do, is to totally destroy all of the inhabitants of the land. And but we're going to see later on that they didn't do that, right? And it's going to cause a lot of problems.
It's still causing problems.
Yes.
over today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about this chair. I'm going to get some WD-40. Unless I forget, which I probably will. But
But there was that threat in verse 56 that God made to them.
Yeah.
He said the Israelites, he would drive them out later on. And of course, we know that he did, and they went into captivities.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that we learn in the book of Deuteronomy, we'll look at more when we get there, is that God is using Israel as a judgment force. And if they're not going to serve that purpose, then he will find somebody else who will, and he'll use them. Very good. All right. Anything you would like to say through 33? All right. Now we need to go to look at 34 and the borders of the land. And basically, I think this is mostly giving a kind of an outline for what the land is going to look like. There is going to be some instruction with regards to the tribes, but most of that's going to wait for Joshua once they've actually taken the land. But we will get some information about the borders. So, for example, let's see, look at just start with verse 2. Command the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you as an inheritance, even the land of Canaan according to your borders, according to its borders. And your southern sector shall extend from the wilderness of Zin along the side of Edom, and your southern border shall extend from the end of the Salt Sea eastward. So the Salt Sea is the Dead Sea, right? Which is why it's called the Dead Sea, because there's so much salt in it. Everything's dead, right? So that will go eastward, and it will actually go down to the brook of Egypt. That is not the Nile River. There's a little river that kind of about halfway between the Nile River and maybe the bottom of what we think of as land of Canaan, called the brook of Egypt, and that will be their border there. And then the western border is pretty easy. It's the Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. Its coastline will be the western border. The northern border, you will draw a line from the Great Sea to Mount Hor. And do you have a note about another name for Mount Hor? I was thinking that maybe that was also Mount Hermon, but I didn't make a note here. But anyway, up in the north, to Lebo Hamath, and the termination of the border shall be at Zedad. And then your eastern border, draw a line from Hazar Enan to Sepham, and it will go down from Sepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border shall go down and reach the slope on the east side of the Sea of Kinnereth. Kinnereth is the Sea of Galilee. It's the Hebrew word for Galilee. And the border shall go down to the Jordan, and its termination shall be at the Salt Sea. This shall be a land according to its borders all around. So you have the southern border that goes down into what we'd call the Negev, or the South Country, just below the Salt Sea, kind of even with it, and then kind of sloping down towards Egypt. Then the west side would be the Mediterranean Sea. Then up north into the mountains where Mount Hermon is, and then down the east side with the Jordan. Now, of course, you're also going to have the tribes on the far side, but that'll be settled, and we've already gotten a description for that. And he mentions that in verses 14 and 15. Okay, you have something
So
else?
this is the inheritance of the 9.5 tribes, right?
That's right. Yes, sir. 9.5 tribes. That's right. Yes, because the others we've already described those back over in chapter 32.
One thing about this, God had already given them this land.
Mm-hmm.
He promised it to them, and it's already their land, but they've got to go in and fight to possess it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's their part. That's up to them.
Very good. All right, anything else through that? All right, so the last chapter I think that we need to cover in Numbers is actually the next to last chapter in Numbers, which is chapter 35. And this is going to have to do with both the cities for the Levites and the cities of refuge. So you want to start us off on that?
And the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession, and you shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. They shall have the cities to dwell in, and their common land shall be for their cattle, for their herds, and for all the animals. So they're going to have to be given cities by all the other tribes, and there's going to be a certain portion of that land, kind of like for a buffer zone for their cattle and all their animals.
That's right.
The common land of the cities which you will give the Levites shall extend from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. And you shall measure outside the city on the east side to 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits. It's pretty. The city shall be in the middle. This shall belong to them as common land for the cities. Now, among the cities which you will give to the Levites, you shall appoint 6 cities of refuge, to which a manslayer may flee, and to these you shall add 42 cities. So that all the cities you will give to the Levites shall be 48. These you shall give with their common land, and the cities which you will give shall be from the possession of the children of Israel. From the larger tribe you shall give many, from the smaller tribes you shall give few. Each shall give some of its cities to the Levites in proportion to the inheritance that each receives. And so it just talks about the 48 cities, and of course the 6 cities of refuge. It's going to continue talking about that through the rest of the chapter, and so I don't. We'll talk about that as we go through the rest of the chapter.
Yeah, that's right. So what they'll do is they're going to set up 6 cities of refuge. 3 will be on the side of the Jordan that we typically think about the land of Canaan, and then 3 will be on the side where Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh settled. So you have 3 on each side. They're going to be distributed throughout the land so that it's, they'll have one in the northern part, one in the center, and one in the southern part. And the purpose of these cities of refuge, well, I'll let you say. What is the purpose of these cities of refuge? You're going to go there to wait for a trial. So what are the circumstances where you can flee to one of these and be protected? You kill somebody, how? On accident, right? So the example that it gives, I think it's here. Let's see. It's not that he was lying in wait. In another place, I think it's in the book of Deuteronomy, he says, if you're out chopping wood and your axe head flies off, which is a horrifying prospect, but I guess that had happened, and probably has happened since. But it's not. So I think this is an important principle. Somebody would say, well, that's nobody's fault. Well, I understand what you're saying. Nobody's to blame, maybe, but somebody's going to bear the weight of that, right? Somebody's got to bear the responsibility for that. And I know with my kids, it's amazing how many things go wrong in the house, but nobody's to blame. There's nobody. I don't know who did it. But in this case, even the man who accidentally kills his neighbor, right? He's not lying in wait. He's not angry. He's not staking him out. There's an accident. He must still flee to the city of refuge, right? Something serious has still happened, and that needs to be addressed. So he has to flee to this city of refuge. Now, what happens there in the city of refuge? Well, let me say this. Why does he have to flee to the city of refuge?
If he did flee to the city of refuge, there at whatever town or whatever he's in, they would just kill him.
Right.
And then this way, when he flees to the refuge, the congregation actually evaluates the evidence of what actually transpired and then they give a verdict on whether he's to spare his life or he's to be killed.
Yeah, so this person who kills accidentally, the person who can kill him is called the Avenger of Blood. And I take it to be that it's a family member of the person who had been killed. And it was, somebody says, well, this is just like vigilante justice. This is the God-given ordained way for carrying out justice. This is, you put the responsibility on this person and then it's over. But this man can go, and the Avenger of Blood can't touch him there. And as Mr. Steve said, he's given a trial, and then it's determined. Now, if it's determined that he killed this person intentionally, well, he suffers the death penalty like anybody else. But if it was an accident, he can stay there in the city of refuge. And how long does he have to stay? For the rest of his life, there's one condition that he can leave. This is in verse 32. You shall not take, well, I don't know if this is the first place that it's mentioned. Oh, yes, verse 25. The congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the blood avenger, and the congregation shall restore him to his city of refuge to which he fled, and he shall live in it until the death of the high priest who is anointed with the holy oil. So I don't know why the death of the high priest was such a significant moment, but it was. And so if you were a runaway, if you were somebody who had taken refuge in one of these cities, when the high priest died, then you would be free to go back without the fear of the Avenger of Blood. And so, anyway.
Another thing is, if you kill someone accidentally, you better hurry up and get to the city of refuge because you're vulnerable.
Yeah, no dilly-dallying. That's right. All right. Well, very good. Any thoughts or comments before we go tonight? So, Lord willing, on Wednesday night, we'll pick up in the book of Deuteronomy. And then we'll take a singing night break and then be back at it.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.